the UAE Special Envoy for Climate Change, Honorable Ministers for Climate Change, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Let me start my remarks by expressing my deepest gratitude to the government and the people of Kenya for the warm welcome and for successfully hosting this first Africa Climate Change Summit. Excellencies, the biggest threat faced by humanity today is climate change. It is a threat whose effects are felt by all. But its causes have their roots in the action of a few. Take Africa for instance. We collectively emit less than 5% of carbon, but we are the most vulnerable region. My country, South Sudan, with tiny emissions, for example, is currently experiencing floods, droughts, heat waves, and irregular rain patterns. We have over 2 million people who have lost their livelihoods as a result of climate change and are in dire need of support. In the face of this reality, we cannot continue to lament about the impact of climate change, nor continue to wait for the financial support that has been promised but not delivered. We must seize this opportunity given to us by this African Climate Summit to come up with additional ways to address the impact of climate change. Why am I calling for additional measures? The reason is very clear. The $100 billion that was pledged at the United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP15, in 2009, has not been delivered. More importantly, that amount is not enough because Africa alone requires over $3 trillion to enable, mitigate, and adapt to the climate change. As Africans, we need to understand that transitioning to low carbon economy will come from within, and its path lies in operationalizing the theme of this summit, driving green growth and climate finance solutions for Africa and the world. This is the way to go. Driving green growth will allow us to come up with solutions that will address the financial gap between what was pledged in Copenhagen summit in 2009 and the actual figure needed by African countries to combat climate change. Excellencies, in South Sudan, we are endowed with the natural resources, and the challenges we face as a country are about finding ways to exploit these resources in a sustainable manner. The key question we have always is, how do we responsibly exploit these resources in ways that contribute towards mitigation and adaptation to the impact of climate change. Part of our answer to these challenges lie in aligning our climate change policy with climate action plan that cuts emissions and adapt to climate impact. Presently, South Sudan has developed its second nationally determined contributions with the goal of generating 3,000 megawatts of renewable energy from hydro, solar, with the solar wind and geothermal gas. This to us is the path to net zero carbon by 2050. On top of this planned path, we aim to embark on climate-smart agriculture to meet our food needs. Apart from changing how we plan our development to mitigate the impact of climate change, we also have a vast potential in carbon trading that can generate further revenue to finance our climate adaptation. Our natural forests and the sud wetlands have the largest capacity to absorb carbon in the world. In fact, I'm proud to say that the Sud wetland in my country is the third long of the world. These ecosystems can sequester millions of tons of carbon dioxide annually, and in them lies the potential for carbon trading I just mentioned. Excellencies, what I have enumerated are steps we can take individually as countries to reverse the impact of climate change. However, we in the global south expect developed countries to play their part, first by cutting their emissions by over 45%, and second, by living their commitment that was made in 2009 in Copenhagen to finance climate adaptation in developing countries. We cannot meet the target of maintaining the temperature rise to 1.5 Celsius by 2030 if the developed countries fail to meet their commitments, both in providing resources to assist with climate adaptation and leading the way in cutting their own emissions. Once again, I congratulate Kenya for successfully organizing the first Africa Climate Summit. I hope that all of us will speak with one voice at COP28 in Dubai. The time for climate action is now. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Let's give a round of applause to President Salva Kiir. Let me now take this opportunity to request President Macky Sall, the President of Senegal, to make his statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, President William RUTO, dear brother, chers collègues, chef d'État.
Dear colleagues, Head of State and Government, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mr. Current Chairman of the African Union, Heads of Delegation, Honorable Ministers, distinguished participants. I thank you, President RUTO, for your kind invitation and the brotherly welcome accorded to us and for the invitation to this first Africa Climate Summit. I want to congratulate you on your leadership and as has been demonstrated in your very powerful statement this morning. The time is ripe for taking stock of the implementation of the commitments on climate and also to agree on an African common position. Everybody knows the risks and dangers related to global warming that continue to affect our countries, and worse still, they have even worsened. The last report of IPCC confirmed that the African countries will be the most impacted by climate change, while they contribute less than 4% of global warming. Africa, we must say, reacts in line with its measures, in line with its means, through innovative and research for solutions for decarbonization and also the climate change. At the global level, 11 Saharan countries execute the project of the Great Green Wall for a decade now. On that score, Senegal implements a reforestation program of 500,000 hectares of indigenous forests, and in order to stop the encroachment of the desert and restore, rehabilitate soil, the biodiversity, and support the silvopastoral activities. We pursue our efforts, to, in fact, execute the carbon resilient projects, and particularly as regards energy transition. And thanks to the implementation of our mixed energy programs, renewable energy represents today 31% of our electricity installed capacity, and part of it is from solar energy, and the other components come from wind and hydroelectric power. We at present implement an important program of rural electrification of more than 1,000 villages, financed at the cost of 75 million euros, together with the Green Climate Fund and also with the West African Bank. These efforts will be strengthened thanks to the strategy. That is, we need to agree, and we cannot prevent Africa from using its domestic energy sources. We, in this transitional phase, ensure that the solutions, African solutions, be over in carbon and also be resilient, and obviously for those who pollute more or less than 3%, that energy transition be abandoned. It will be, in fact, another injustice to Africa. For us, gas is an energy transition, and our policy in energy transition towards zero, net zero, is on the transport system with the regional express train, which is operational for 2 years now, which carry more than 130,000 people every day, which obviously is electric, and also the rapid electric bus, and which obviously will be used before the end of the year. In the same spirit, Senegal signed last June with the partners of G7 its program for an energy transition, which is based on JEPI, with an investment that requires the mobilization of 2.7 million euros, and we have the ambition of raising it to 40% of renewable energy in our energy mix by 2030. Having said that, we have to agree that essentially the African countries should realize and implement their green program, and Mr. President, you have reminded us about it, while the financing of adaptation should be supported by at least by concessional credits in conformity with the what was agreed in Paris. In the perspective of COP28, we should pursue our advocacy for the mobilization of resources dedicated to green financing. That is the key to resolve the problem of climate change and global warming through responsible and interdependent efforts of countries from developing countries. To conclude, I want to express my support to the Alliance for Green Infrastructure initiated by the African Development Bank, the African Union and Africa 50 in order to support the execution of the projects that are carbon sober and that are resilient. And I want to invite all the partners to contribute to this initiative. And finally, I thank the Central Adaptation Center in its work of promotion of the program to accelerate adaptation in Africa. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A round of applause for President Macky Sall, please. Now it's the opportunity for President Jacinto Felipe Nyusi, the President of Mozambique, to make his statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, RUTO, for this opportunity. Your Excellency William Ruto, President of Kenya, Your Excellency Azar Usman, President of Comoros and the Chair at the AU, distinguished heads of state and government, Your Excellency Moussa Faki from the AU Commission, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to commend the invitation of Your Excellency President Ruto and the warm welcome and the invitation to participate in the Africa Climate Summit hosted by the Kenyan government together with the AU Commission. Your Excellencies, the decision by the African Union General Assembly to host this event is in order to have a shared African vision regarding the climate crisis that is affecting the world and mostly Mozambique, Africa. And looking specifically at Mozambique, the country is cyclically ravaged by the impacts of climate change. It's not what I've heard about. This is what we live. And as of February every year, and even until May, we suffer from the adverse effects of climate change. Since 2019, we have suffered from the cyclones Idai, Dineo, Freddy, amongst others. We had many natural storms and drought. Cyclone Freddy was extraordinary because it took longer time, more than 14 days, and we were affected twice by Cyclone Freddy because first affected us on the coast and then went back, and then it affected again Mozambique on its pathway to Malawi. We know that such disasters affect negatively populations in Mozambique, not only, but in other countries. Your Excellency, your President, the interventions that we've heard were exhaustive. Such statements try to explain what is climate change and what are the impacts of climate change. So I'll not be repetitive, and I would like to be more objective and straightforward by sharing the experience of Mozambique with regard to climate change, prevention, mitigation, and adaptation, and to emphasize the following. First, the conservation areas. 25% of the Mozambican territory is covered by parks, reserves, game parks, including marine protection areas. In this perspective, different actions were endeavored by the Mozambican government, together with private partners and local communities, in protecting these areas that have led to the reduction of poaching of rhinos, lions, as well as illegal logging. So why am I referring to the cooperation of communities? Because very often we just talk at a high level, but those that are living those realities with the nature is communities. So they have to be collaborating with us in order to protect what are their livelihoods. I've also spoken about elephants. You know that the best gardener in the forest is the animal, specifically elephant, meaning that if we do not protect, for example, our animals, our gardens and our forests can be threatened seriously. Secondly, Mozambique hosts the most extensive Miombo forest, which is the largest ecosystemic system in the world, and it extends for more than 2,564 kilometers throughout the Zambezi Basin. As a way of protecting the Zambezi Basin that covers 8 countries from Southern Africa, last year we have held the regional conference under the leitmotif towards an integrated and sustainable management of Miombo, towards resilience to climate change and protection of the Great Zambezi. Thirdly, in Mozambique, the disaster risk management is governed by law, whereby it sets forth an integrated disaster risk management reduction, sustainable recovery of human resiliency, as well as infrastructural resiliency, ecosystemic resiliency, and climate change adaptation. I would like to emphasize that, for example, for each construction work that occurs in Mozambique, they have to comply with the law in order to be considered as resilient construction works. Fourth, we have created disaster risk insurance in order to cater for situations of natural disasters and support of vulnerable groups. One of the efforts towards disaster risk management and reduction is by engaging local communities, as also referred, but we are also prioritizing conservation agriculture. This is relevant in our strategy towards food security, and we promote the preservation of soils, soil quality, the preservation of water resources, the prevention of wildfires that led to deforestation and adverse effects from climate change. Moreover, the management of biomass energy, considering that our rural communities greatly rely on firewood. So we have been expanding rural electrification based on our national grid from the Kaborabasa Dam and solar grids within the initiative Energy for All. Besides expanding the Cabora Bassa Dam that serves up some of the countries in Southern Africa. We are also prioritizing some hydroelectric projects such as Pandankua, as well as the Ntemani gas plant. And Ntemani will have around 400 megawatts, it will be the major one. 8, we have the territorial planning project. Through the territorial development and spatial planning. And this occurs because very often we see that people just build irregularly, and if we do not plan how we are going to build our urban spaces, we can lead or contribute towards erosion. Another aspect has to do with institutional and legal reforms based on the protection of biodiversity, including the reactivation of the main fines, and meaning that we have severed fines and penalties against poaching, related to poaching, as well as illegal logging. As a result of these institutional and legal reforms, Mozambique has been considered in carbon credits, and Mozambique is the first African country to receive payments from the World Bank related to carbon trade. By strengthening the early warning system, we have implemented the program One District, One Weather Center. I'm just emphasizing what we're doing as a country because we cyclically suffer from adverse weather effects. So we have decided to strengthen our early warning systems so that communities are ready when those disasters strike us. This year we have also inaugurated the Beira meteorology radar in the central part of our country in order to detect cyclones in a radius of 400 kilometers, and we are planning on setting up 2 additional radars in the northern and southern part of the country. Hence, we will be covering the whole country. We also adopted the Maputo Declaration regarding the integrated early warning system that fits into the national operational and strategic goals. We would also like to share that Mozambique also hosts the the SADC Humanitarian Operation Center, which is a center aiming at protection and prevention. Mozambique has an extensive coastline of around 2,700 kilometers, meaning that we should give special attention to the ocean as the regulator of temperature and climate in the planet. We have ratified the Marpol Convention of 1978 regarding sea pollution that also complements the national legislation regarding illegal fishing and the protection of marine diversity, meaning that if we do not protect our biodiversity, we are going to contribute towards negative impact of the environment, especially the oceans. Your Excellency, before I conclude, Your Excellency RUTO, I would like to show my appreciation for this initiative, and we also would like to exhort all the leaders here to subscribe as a single voice the Nairobi Declaration regarding climate change, and we have a collective action towards it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A round of applause again for President Nyusi. Let me now take this opportunity to give the floor to President Nana Akufo-Addo, the President of Ghana. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
President RUTO, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I join other speakers in applauding the Kenyan President, our host, President William Ruto, for his initiative in convening this summit, and thank him for his hospitality. A summit to define a common African position towards the deliberations of COP28 in Dubai is a highly commendable one, especially if it can help us define how we can mobilize our own resources to address this critical issue of climate change. Ghana's nationally determined contributions towards combating climate change have been fully incorporated into government's coordinated program for economic and social development policies to facilitate their implementation. We have introduced major policy interventions that have development and climate projection imperatives. Our flagship programs, whether they are the programs for planting for food and jobs, or one village, one dam, or one district, one factory, are all geared towards boosting industrialization and rural development, as well as building our resilience to the impacts of climate change. The strategic focus of the One Village, One Dam initiative, for example, in the northern regions of our country, is to provide all year-round access to water to smallholder farmers who practically have no viable livelihood alternatives during the long dry seasons. We're also determined to make natural gas, which we have in abundance, available for the generation of electricity. We placed a ban on illegal mining, the phenomenon we call galamsey, which was destroying our water bodies, vegetation, and our forests. Some 20,000 young people have been engaged to plant more than 30 million trees in 2 years to create jobs and restore degraded land. These policy initiatives are already using positive results to the attainment of the SDG goals, particularly the goal of reducing our carbon emissions. Additionally, I have established an advisory group of prominent private sector chief executives who are setting up a $100 million SDGs delivery fund and a $200 million green fund to complement government's efforts at tackling climate change and funding the implementation of the SDGs. Whilst we strive to do our bit to halt climate change at the national level, we expect also a lot to be done at the international level. One major issue of concern to us is the need to streamline access to international climate finance to complement national funding. I believe this forum will throw more light on practical ways to mobilize financial resources to support the implementation of national climate actions, especially how we can guarantee a different future from the past and ensure that the commitments of the developed world towards climate finance, which have not been met in the past, will be met in the future. Excellencies, it is obvious that we have to act swiftly and decisively to mitigate these effects and ensure a sustainable future for generations to come. The impact of climate change, as we know, is not limited to the African continent alone. It is a global issue that affects all of us. Thus, addressing climate change in Africa, as President RUTO so forcefully articulated, is a moral and strategic necessity for global climate action. Hopefully, COP28 in Dubai will provide us a concrete roadmap towards that end and ensure a just energy transition for us in Africa. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A round of applause again for President Nana. Let me now take this opportunity to ask my sister, the President of Tanzania, President Suluhu Hassan, to make her statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya and Chair of the African Committee of Heads of State and Government on Climate Change, Excellencies, Heads of State and Governments, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, thank you very much for being a gracious host of this August Assembly that sets the tone of Africa's growth now and the future. I thank the government and the people of Kenya for the excellent preparation of the summit and the warm reception accorded to me and my delegation. The convening of this important summit is both timely and opportune, as the theme, driving green growth and climate finance solution for Africa and the world, is quite befitting, especially now ahead of COP28, where parties will take stock of our efforts to address the climate crisis and commitment to address both climate crisis in the context of the Paris Agreement and the Climate Convention itself. Excellencies, the stakes are high and actions have to take place not tomorrow, but today and literally now. As Africans, we have no choice but to seize the moment to capitalize on its potential to offer solutions to green growth and decarbonization, and while creating resilience to our communities and economies. We can no longer afford to address economic development, climate change, and African poverty burden in isolation. The interplay between development and climate change is undeniable, and this interlink demand integrated and coherent solution that will provide opportunity for socio-economic development of Africa. Excellencies, while the continent is highly impacted by the changing climate, it is nevertheless holding the key to solving the climate challenge. The just released Economic Development in Africa Report 2023 shows the potential of Africa to capture technology-intensive global supply chains, and it said it all about development of Africa with climate change. It provides a unique insight into Africa's centrality to the green transition that will clearly transform our continent economies. It is said that all metals and minerals that are important and strategic for the low-carbon transition are abundantly found in Africa. And these are chromium, lithium, natural graphite, nickel, niobium, rare earth metals, silver, and many more. Given the abundance of these minerals, the continent needs to reposition itself not only as a supplier of raw materials globally, but strengthen the value chains by ensuring their conversion into intermediate and final products is done within the continent. As critical minerals, as they were called critical minerals, they have to make critical contributions to our internal revenue collection and employment creation. They also have to contribute critically in the environmental protection in our countries. So having all these, Africa has to stand firm to use the materials for our own development. Excellencies, human capital dividend in Africa is another force to reckon. To avoid the past mistakes in the history of our continent, we need to focus on human capital advancement by training our own people, especially youth, so as to be able to reap from these vast opportunities. We need to consider the climate crisis as an opportunity to address the youth unemployment challenges. Excellencies, beyond the African potentials, we have potentials in our individual countries. My country, Tanzania, is leading the way by demonstrating strong momentum in driving the green growth. Almost 95% of our energy is from hydro and natural gas. We are also leading in nature conservation with almost 38% of our land mass under conservation in various regimes. We are also committed in nurturing the ecosystems that hold the promise of creating thousands of new jobs and unlimited national economic and global benefits. Talking on the offering of critical mineral to the world, Tanzania has huge deposits of some of these critical minerals needed today. Helium is present around Lake Rukwa Basin, nickel deposit around Lake Victoria, graphite reserves at the southern eastern part of the country, and we also accommodate other deposits, critical minerals, including copper and lithium, as well as rare elements. Despite of the above scenario, we, however, need to face the fact that Tanzania, and indeed the whole of the African continent, still faces unprecedented impacts of climate change, with limited capacity to finance the mitigation and adaptation needs. And thus, as we head towards COP28, we have to raise an African voice on the establishment and capitalization of a special fund for Africa. The contribution and the pledges which are given by the advanced countries have to say what percentage of those pledges goes to Africa, and not just a blanket pledges. As I conclude, and as you are all aware, Tanzania is hosting the AGRIF Food and Agriculture Summit this same week. The presidential summit is on 7th of September, a day after tomorrow. I therefore wish to use this opportunity to once again invite you to Tanzania, and I'll personally be there to welcome you all. Once again, I congratulate you, Mr. President RUTO, for organizing such a successful event, and I look forward to seeing you all in Dar es Salaam. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Another round of applause for President Samia Suluhu Hassan. Now it's my pleasure to request my brother, President Mohamed Yunus Memfi, the President of Libya, to make his remarks. Your Excellency, Mr. President.
Your Excellency, President of Kenya, President William Ruto, and head of the Committee of African Heads of States concerned with climate change. Heads of states, heads of governments, members of the African Union, Mr. Fuka Musa Fiki, head of the African Commission. May I extend my wholeheartedly thanks to President Ruto and the Kenyan people for hosting this very important summit. It is important for Africa and it's important for the whole world. I'd like to congratulate President Ruto for his wise leadership for the African Committee on Climate Change. I value the efforts exerted by the Commission to have a uniformed African stance with regards to all sorts of related matters and all sorts of mutual concerns. Since the inception of the African Union, Africa has always been saying that it should get rid of the historic injustice it's suffering from until now. But we're facing so many risks and challenges imposed by climate change, and it's affecting the whole world. The African Union called on us to work hands in hands, rich and poor, north and south, and to mobilize all our efforts and resources to mitigate those risks and to also adapt to those changes, and to change and transform those risks and challenges to opportunities based on strategic partnership to bridge the financing and technical gap, to empower Africa and the South in general to move forward from the weakest link to the high level of being a partner, and this would give more opportunities for adaptation to the whole world. And that would help us to achieve a sustainable horizontal development. We should undertake quick and urgent measures to eliminate any kind of damages or risks that could be irreparable in the future or could threaten life on this planet Earth. We need more solutions. Africa has always been a promising continent. As you can see in this summit, Africa can provide to this planet a lot if our partners are committed to their pledges. This is a good opportunity to deal with the risks in an efficient way, starting with carbon emissions to green growth, green minerals, all those opportunities to provide sustainability and opportunities for energy sources that can be very well used in environment-friendly uses, by bridging the technical and bridging the financing gap and the technical gap, and to have different renewables like, for instance, solar energy, wind, and all sorts of other sources. And also we need to talk about fossil energy. We need to have some kind of harmonized climate initiatives to face climate change and to stand against the individual interests of some of the industrialized countries. The African continent requests are clear in the documents of this meeting and also in the decision of the African meeting that decided on holding this summit before COP28 in Abu Dhabi. And in the draft declaration of our summit, all these texts helps us to have concerted efforts and to stick to our stance and to call on bridging any kind of barriers between us and other industrialized countries, and to draw together the upcoming stage on basis of partnership, seeking one unified goal and according to partnership. Would like to greet our development partners attending today, the international organizations, the private sector, the scientific research centers, the academia, the civil society, women, youth, and also the participants in the Environment Expo. And after the conclusion of this meeting, which is going to be crowned with our declaration representing the unified African stance, we're going to be able to mobilize our efforts, and we're going to attend and participate in COP28 to defend the outcomes of our summit here in Nairobi. And thank you very much. Thank you, President Ruto.
Your Excellency. A round of applause for President MPYA again. Thank you. Let me now take this opportunity to ask my brother, Julius Bio, the President of Sierra Leone, to make his statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, President Dr. William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, Your Excellency Azali Assoumani, President of the Union of Comoros and Chairperson of the African Union, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Your Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, Chairperson of the African Union Commission, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General, Your Excellency Patricia Scotland, the Secretary General for Commonwealth, Your Excellency First Ladies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm pleased to address this high-level session of the African Climate Summit 2023 under the Kenyan presidency and to reaffirm Sierra Leone's commitment to scale up climate action urgently. I must thank His Excellency President William Ruto and the government of the Republic of Kenya for the excellent arrangements made for this summit as African countries seek to address climate change priorities in this critical decade. From coastal kisses with the Atlantic Ocean to the panoramic vista, from the towering cane of the mountains, the Loma Mountain, to our sprawling national parks, Sierra Leone is a canvas painted with nature's most vibrant hues. Our golden beaches are a testament to nature's artistry. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, if you've not been to Sierra Leone, I'm inviting you to come. However, beneath our nation's beauties lies an unmistakable urgency. With a median age of just over 19 years, our young population, like the other young populations representing Africa's vibrant future, stand at a defining crossroads. Their legacy, and indeed our collective legacy, is shaped by the choices we make today. The seas, once serenading us with gentle lullabies, now one of rising tides that could erase generational achievements. The rains which celebrated our lands now pose a looming threat. Why Sierra Leone is rich with nature's gift. This very geographical splendor renders us vulnerable. Climate change for us isn't a distant shadow. Climate projections in Sierra Leone include temperature increases, extreme weather conditions, intense precipitation, and rising sea levels. Our shores, symbols of natural grandeur, are receding. Many of our communities face displacement, and our pristine beaches risk fading away, and calamities like landslide and floods have become hauntingly regular. The surge in pests and diseases is another testament to our enduring imbalance. Without swift collective action, we risk witnessing the obliteration of Sierra Leone's invaluable ecosystems, leading to further dislocation of our communities and the devastation of their sources of sustenance. This is not just a Sierra Leone story. It is an African story. And I dare say it is a global story too. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, our world is in trouble. But our continent is even more so. The evidence is clear. The time for action is now. But we are running out of time. Grounded in this stark reality, my government remains unwavering in our commitment to fortifying climate resilience, ensuring our people thrive sustainably and harmoniously with nature. In our updated nationally determined commitment, Sierra Leone has defined a progressive pathway forward for cutting greenhouse gases emissions from the 2005 levels by 5% by 2025, 10% by 2030, and 25% by 2050. My government is unyieldingly devoted to climate change resilience and adaptation. This includes support for community-based adaptation in agriculture and energy sectors, integrated water resource management, and climate change disaster risk management. We are also poised to improve meteorological services for early warning systems and enhance and protect conservation of natural habitats and ecosystems. Furthermore, our climate change mitigation strategies extend to promoting renewable energy, infrastructure, resilience, and extensive reforestation efforts on at least 960,000 hectares of land. As we engage in country planning, we will also prioritize low carbon screening. Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, to reaffirm our commitment, we have institutionalized efforts against this global menace. We have established a dedicated Ministry of Environment and Climate Change and a Climate Change, Renewable Energy and Food Security Presidential Initiative led by Dr. Kande Yonkela. We are designing policies and programs and laying the framework for establishing strong partnerships for funding and implementing projects on major cross-cutting thematic areas of national and global significance. Agriculture is the mainstay of our economy. Recognizing the core importance and extreme vulnerability of agriculture in Sierra Leone, we are focusing on resilience and innovation within this sector, leveraging technology and forward-thinking strategies for climate adaptation. Our overarching aspiration, as enshrined in our National Development Plan, is clear. Achieve food and nutrition security by 2030 through climate-smart practices bolstered by renewable energy throughout the agricultural value chain. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, meaningful inclusion and intergenerational dialogue are crucial to achieving SDG 13, to take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. In Sierra Leone, we consider our women equal partners for development. We passed the Progressive Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Bill, which guaranteed by law a minimum of 30% representation of women for all appointive and elective positions. My government is committed to promoting the inclusion of women in climate resilience programs and the participation of women in decision-making for climate change adaptation and mitigation governance at all levels. We must harness our demographic dividends on the continent and involve our youthful population in our climate adaptation and mitigation efforts throughout by involving the youth in everything that we do. Sierra Leone's quest for environmental resilience hinges upon our capacity to address climate finance, build local competencies, and refine our legislative blueprints, and etc. Solutions like carbon markets, innovative debt swaps, and novel financial tools such as leveraging our natural resources may be our bridge to surmount a fiscal chasm. Our appeal is clear. Sierra Leone seeks equitable, nimble, and timely access to climate financing. We ask for unbarred access to new climate change adaptation and mitigation technologies and shared knowledge. Our salvation from escalating climate crises lies in collective wisdom and concerted efforts. Another challenge is our institutional prowess in designing programs that attract climate finance is still developing. We yearn for guidance and backing to bolster our legislative architecture, especially concerning forest conservation. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, while shared, the responsibility for climate adaptation and mitigation is not and should not be evenly distributed. Expecting countries like Sierra Leone to bear the brunt of a crisis that scarcely contributed to without robust support from the primary emitters, the industrial giants, is fundamentally unjust. Our stance is unequivocal. We are here to collaborate, not to capitulate. We seek cooperation, not charity. The actions of significant polluters must pivot from mere declarations and vague commitments to actionable, technology-driven reparations. It is a demand grounded in the technical feasibility of climate justice, not just its moral imperative. A unified front against the existential crisis is not just desired, it is imperative. As I close, I implore all of us present, the hourglass of action is dwindling, and the sands of time wait for none. Let's come together, not just in spirit, but in action, but in actionable solidarity. For in unity we find just strength, but not just strength, but salvation. Thank you.
Another round of applause for President Bio. Thank you very much. Now let me take this opportunity to request my sister again, Her Excellency Sale Work Zewde, the President of Ethiopia. Madam President, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President William Ruto, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very important summit. Congratulations to the African Union for organizing it and for Kenya for being our gracious host as it is in the tradition of this country. Africa has tried its best to make
Mkuu wa chuo cha Kilimanjaro Institute of Technology and Management kilichopo Mwenge jijini Dar es Salaam na chenye ithibati na usajili wa NACVET number REG/ANE/029 anapenda kuwatangazia nafasi za masomo kwa ngazi ya diploma na certificate kwa muhula wa masomo utakaoanza Oktoba 2023 katika kozi za IT, Business Administration, Accountancy, Procurement and Supply, Front Office na Hotel Management. Chuo kimebobea katika ufundishaji kwa njia ya vitendo na kimeweza kutoa wanafunzi wenye wengi wameajiriwa ama kujiajiri, na kwa wale ambao wameamua kuendelea na degree wameweza kujiunga na vyuo vikuu bora hapa nchini na nje ya nchi. Pia kuna ofa ya kozi fupi za computer application, graphics and design, video production pamoja na CCTV camera. Kwa maelezo zaidi piga simu namba 0766348652 au 0717816034. KITM, elimu na ujuzi kwa maendeleo ya uchumi.